Have you ever been trained to ask questions? I suspect for many of us, including myself, the answer is no. I've never been through any formal training as to how to ask questions. But a lot of mentoring is listening. And to listen to someone, we need to encourage them to speak up. And that's why we need to know how to ask good questions. Good questions that will help your mentoree or mentee to open up so we can listen to them and so that mentor-mentee together can discern what God is doing in their lives. So that it's very important, therefore, to know how to ask good questions because listening is key to mentoring. So you want to listen, you must ask questions. There are two sides of the same coin. So let me first start by pointing out a few reasons why questions are important. First, question helps people to make a commitment to what they really believe. And for this, I would refer to what Jesus did. Jesus is the master in asking questions. So in Matthew 16, when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" And they replied, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. Then Jesus said, "But what about you? Who do you say I am?" And Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." So you see how Jesus used questions. I mean, many people may believe many things, but what do they really believe? And when confronted with a question, they have to make a decision what they really believe about Jesus. Normally, questions should be open-ended. But once in a while, you can ask a question that helps a mentoree to clarify their convictions. What do they really believe? So number one, questions help people to make a commitment to what they really believe. Secondly, questions stimulate thinking. And when you ask a question, the mentoree will have to think, or mentee have to think, what is really happening here? And to me, this example is from the book of Galatians, where there were many people telling the Galatians that you can't be fully saved unless you obey the law as well. And then Paul asked them in Galatians 3, "You foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? Before your very eyes, Jesus Christ was clearly portrayed as crucified. I would like to learn just one thing from you. Did you receive the Spirit by the works of the law or by believing what you heard?" So this would force them to think, oh yeah, we believe Christ and we already received the Spirit. We didn't need to obey the law to receive the Spirit. That means the law is not crucial to salvation. It's faith in Christ. But that question from Paul forced them to think. So questions stimulate thinking. Questions help us to know our mentoree better, of course. We have said many times that mentoring is personal and relational. And unless you ask questions, you may not know details about your mentoree's life and their life story. So number three, questions help you to get information that helps you get to know your mentoree better, your mentee better. Fourth, questions help you to guide the mentoring journey. By asking the right questions, you help the mentee to think in a certain direction. For example, we mentioned in Matthew 16 how Jesus asked them, "Who do you say I am?" And they said, "The Messiah." And the next thing Jesus teaches them is about the fact that he was going to be crucified. So asking them about who he is then leads to this further revelation that he is the Messiah who is also the suffering servant. So that's what he wants to teach them, that the Messiah is the suffering servant. But by asking them, "Who do you think I am?" begins the journey in that direction of a clearer revelation of who Jesus is. Questions also help people to open up. Some are shy, some are more private by nature. But when you ask them questions, you help them. Actually, they may want to share, but they may not know whether it's appropriate or what. But when they have been asked a question, then they know it's time for them to share and to open up. And questions lead to quality listening. So listening and questions, as I said, are two sides of the same coin. And finally, questions help people to make up their own minds. It's not just telling them something. When they are confronted with a question, they make up their minds, then they come to, hey, yeah, this is what I really believe. So it's not something that they have been told, but something that they have come to decide and believe on their own. So we see this in Luke 10, for example, where the teacher of the law said, but who is my neighbor? Jesus doesn't give a direct answer. He tells the story of the priest, the Levite, and the Samaritan, and then he asked them, which of these people was a neighbor? Then he said, well, the one who showed mercy. So now the teacher of the law has to embrace and come to that realization. Because Jesus just doesn't tell him, Jesus asked him a question. So these are the power of questions, and that's why you need to know how to ask good questions. But we also need to talk a bit about characteristics of good questions. What represents a good question? So I'll just talk about this briefly. First of all, instead of just rushing to how to ask a good questions, we must talk about motivation. Why do we want to ask good questions? We must be motivated by a desire to build a relationship with your mentee. So because mentoring is relational and personal. And for that to happen, I need to know them better. I need to guide them in a certain direction. And that's why I need to ask questions. So it's not just a technique or a program, but rather it's part of the journey of an ongoing conversation where you get to know your mentee better. Number two, apart from motivation, we need to avoid unhelpful questions, like questions that demand an answer and guide them to say something. Like last night's preaching was lousy, right? Now that's a guiding question. You're already hoping that they will say a certain thing. It's not an open question. Or a setup question. You know that they didn't do something and you ask a question and you know they can't answer just to embarrass them. Now that is also salah, that's also wrong. You don't use a setup question or ask questions where you know but they don't know to embarrass them, or angry questions. Why do you do that? It sounds like a question, but you're not asking, you're scolding. This is not a good thing. So ask open questions, like close versus open. Close will be like, what is 5 plus 5? There's only one answer. There's nothing much for the mentoree to say. As opposed to, why do you think mathematics is important? This is an open question. Then they can share their feelings, their thoughts, their opinions. Or right or wrong answers. Is murder okay? And of course the answer is obvious. But an open question would be, why do you think some people are moved to murder? Now that's an open question. So try to avoid closed questions and go for open questions. But finally, when people give answers, don't be judgmental. Don't jump to conclusions before you hear everything. That's one of my weaknesses. I tend to assume I know what is going to say, what's going to be said, and I jump to conclusions. To ask questions, we shut up and listen for the answer, no matter how long it takes. Secondly, don't jump to give advice. Oh, that's the situation. Let me tell you what to do. In future, they won't answer very well. They will assume that you're just there to give advice and not to listen to them. And finally, of course, you need to be present. That means emotionally, physically, spiritually, you must be focusing on your mentee. Your mind cannot be wandering here and there. You have to really be there physically, spiritually, emotionally when you ask the questions and when the replies are given. So I hope these few tips will help you to begin a journey of asking good questions so that you can listen and be a better mentor.